Okay, so just want to say thanks again for joining. Tonight's chat topic is Bizet's Carmen and the Carmen suite that we're supposed to perform. The second suite, there is so much to say about this piece. The last two that we've done of these, I've given you plenty of history and plenty of maps. That is not going to be the case today because there's so much to talk about in the music itself that we're just going to go pretty much straight into it, apart from a brief little overview of the opera itself. So, did everybody get your email and like the things that were included in that email that Abigail sent out? There was a full
Yes.
score. There was some pictures. If you haven't checked in a while, make sure to check. Get those opened up. They'll be useful and handy as we go through this today. So the thing that you don't have is my little Carmen analysis document, which I was not yet ready for publication at the time of me sending those over to Abigail. So I'm just going to do some screen sharing, which we're used to by now. So let's dive into it. Let's just get straight to it. And the first thing we're going to do, here we go. A brief, the briefest of intros this piece has probably ever gotten. But at this point, Bizet was already doing just fine composing. And after the Franco-Prussian War, man, there's a lot of wars. Have you noticed how much wars affect compositions? Sibelius and all of his, and then, it's the last time, who did we talk about? What did we talk about last time? I forget already. It was Monday. My gosh. What did we talk about? Somebody remind me.
Crap, what's his last name?
We did the Italian Revolution, basically.
Thank you. We did Verdi's Nabucco. My goodness, 2 days ago, and I already forgot the opera we did. Today is a different opera but it also involves wars of other sorts in other parts of the continent. So kind of, yeah, so it's always about war, it seems. But after the Franco-Prussian War, things kind of settled back to normal, things that we're waiting for here still in the US. Things were finally settling back to normal, and Bizet himself was settling back to normal. He got a commission to write a one-act, and this one act was called Jamila, which is very rarely performed, but it's a really cool piece. It was a total failure. It later got moderate success, so that's why I put moderate success, but at the time, not really a big hit, but it did give him an additional commission for what was to be Carmen. So the libretto was supposed to be supplied by two gentlemen, Henri Méliac and Ludovic Halevi, two very famous librettists. One of them was related to Bizet. There's a whole lot of stories about that and their collaborations. Halevi was very famous for writing librettos for Offenbach's operettas, like Tales of Hoffmann, things like that. Very well established. And so anyway, so this partnership is formed because of this commission. And then Bizet himself is actually the one that proposed the idea of creating a piece based on Mérimée Carmen. Prosper Mérimée was a French author around this time, wrote a lot of different things, but one topic he was fascinated about was Spain. And Mérimée himself went to Spain in 1830. He has two works that pretty much dive into Spain. One of them is Carmen. The other one is called Letters from Spain. Both pieces kind of autobiographical in a sense. In a sense, they talk about traveling to Spain, the things you can encounter, the things that you might see. And then there's a lot of fiction that's made up, but either way, it's a great read. It's a fun read. It's actually a short read too. For all of those of you that haven't read Mérimée Carmen, I highly suggest it. It's a fun short read while you're stuck inside and indoors at this time. You can, in fact, find it online. It's one of those like public domain Google reads that you could easily access. Totally fine. All right, but anyway, so like I said, the original material is a fun blend of travel stories, adventure fiction, blah, 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 which is fun enough because it's inspired by his own travels, but also by a Russian author by the name of Pushkin. I think we've all heard of Pushkin. Pushkin had a novel called The Gypsies, which was kind of instrumental for Mérimée and it sort of blended a lot of concepts. The theme of The Gypsies is going to be quite important in Carmen. It's a central theme. So we'll get to that in a second, though. This opera is kind of unique, and I think it stands out in history as a really cool crossover opera, if you will. It's a blend of Verissimo opera. So at this time, the time that it was written, it premiered in 1875. At this time, you can imagine, just kind of set the scene for yourself. Verdi was already in full swing. So the composer that I could not remember that we just talked about 2 days ago, we talked about a lot of his works and how much he was already established by the 1870s. Puccini was coming on the scene. So Verissimo opera was very much the word of the day. And so these serious operas on these serious topics was really kind of taking over. But because he was commissioned by the Opéra Comique, which actually is a place, it's not just a style of opera, it's also a place. This was an opera house that historically favored lighthearted, fun pieces. It blended these serious and fun elements all into one thing. And we'll talk about those, and I think the suites are a perfect representation of that. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. So we have this blend of serious stuff and fun stuff, all into one big mishmash, and also the different ways it was written with dialogue, with recitatives. It was very audience friendly, and so it wasn't very biased as far as what audience was seeing this opera. We'll talk a little bit about the different versions later on. Basically, all you have to know is that different parts of the world favored different types of opera. So in France, they enjoyed the opera comique tradition. And I wrote for you a little opera comique blurb right here. Basically what that is it's an opera on a French text with music separated by dialogue. Historically a lighthearted, fun little piece, but in the 19th century they began to show serious events. So French audiences enjoyed that. But if you went over to Vienna or to Germany, audiences did not like dialogue in their music, even though there was a strong tradition of doing so. Take a look at Der Freischütz, that has dialogue. It's by Weber from very early in the 19th century. But at this point, things have evolved to the point where they wanted to see recitative or fully through composed operas. So there was a lot of different preferences. The beautiful thing about this one, it was adaptable. There were two versions that existed, one with recitatives, one with dialogue. So it was a very cosmopolitan in a sense. You could do it anywhere in Europe and it would be a hit probably. So that helped it kind of gain some traction. And there are some lighthearted, fun moments in the piece. Don't get me wrong. It's not just all about the serious aspects that it's known for. So it really is a good blend of storytelling. There's a lot of contrasts. There's a lot of different elements in the story. It's got a very good flow. And I think a lot of the same is true in the music that we're going to look at in a second. And that's kind of the whole idea of a suite, is to present music that's contrasting and different. In fact, if you look down here, a suite on my document here in French, it literally means following or succession. There's a very famous term in French called ensuite. So basically as a follow-up to. Well, it actually just refers to a series of instrumental movements with some element of unity. I love that definition, by the way. Some element could be the most minute thing in the world, but there's some element of unity involved. They have to have something that links them all together. And most often these are performed as a single work. Suites can be anywhere from 3 to 24 movements. And yes, there are 24 movement suites out there. But yeah, like I said, the unity may result nothing more from a common key or its origins in a larger work. Hint, hint, Carmen suites, number 1 and 2. But also we already kind of did a little bit of a suite earlier this year, the Nutcracker suite. We played a few movements from that, also taken from a larger work. Doesn't have to be from a larger work. For example, Holst wrote a lot of suites that were basically just multi-movement symphonic poems. They weren't necessarily coming from any one thing. They were just designed to show this one idea, but he had so much to say, he wanted to split it up into 3 movements, and therefore we get a suite. Anyway, historically, what we often hear about suites is that they're a collection of dance movements and styles. And that's very true. And typically, audiences would know that, especially in Europe, the strong historical precedent of, oh, a Baroque dance suite. I know we're going to get a slow dance and a fast dance and a 2/4 and a 3/4 and a 6/8. There's going to be a lot of contrast, a lot of variety. Okay, well, that can be true in these as well. And if you look at the Carmen suites, both of them, 1 and 2, that's actually very true. There's a lot of dance music, there's a lot of contrasts. So they fit the bill really, really well. And so a lot of this music that Bizet wrote lent itself perfectly to being presented all over Europe, A, but B, in the concert halls all around the world. 2 other things that I want us to be aware of the definitions of. We hear this term grand opera a lot, and Carmen is often referred to as a grand opera. And basically what that means, it is a serious work, usually on a historic subject in 4 or 5 acts with chorus and ballet, with text set fully musically, so no dialogue is through composed. It often involved lavish costumes, huge set pieces, dance breaks, like huge ballet dance breaks. It's grand in every sense, and these are the epic operas that lasted 3 to 5 hours on average. We'll say that. So the Huguenots by Meyerbeer is a great example, or Berlioz's the Troyens, the Trojans, great examples of that genre. But Carmen actually was, after its premiere, designed to be a grand opera. So they included elements of ballet. They had massive sets in them. And so sometimes when you see performances of this, if it's labeled grand opera, just know you're going for like a 3 to 5 hour event. Anyway, so the other definition and term that I actually thought was very interesting, I started looking the name Carmen up because it seems to be a very, very random name. If you think of the storyline of this opera, the name Carmen stands out very much. It's not necessarily a Spanish name. It's not necessarily a French name. So where did it come from? And that always fascinated me. Well, I kind of started doing some digging, and there is a literal definition in the Harvard Dictionary of Music. And the definition of Carmen is very simple: song, poem. That's a very literal definition. In the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, it was a term applied to a wide variety of music, including the French chanson. Pretty important because French composers would know that. This is a Renaissance Baroque invention that was very, very, it was a testament to composers who could write successful chansons. There's hundreds and thousands of these in existence. And so I found it interesting that Bizet chose Carmen as the name of his heroine for this opera. And related terms include the canzona and Carmina. Carmina, we often associate the name Carmina with Carmina Burana, or Catulli Carmina, Karl Orff's 2 big, huge works. But basically what they are is poems set to music, and thus the name Carmina, because it's literally a poem. Well, Carmina, I always thought sounded like Carmen, but I never made that connection. So it's pretty incredible how literal this name is. And the first thing Carmen really sings in the opera is a love song. It's a song about love. So anyway, I found that to be very fascinating. And I don't know how many of you knew that. Actually, I'm curious, at a show of hands, how many of you knew that Carmen meant that? Just show me a thumbs up if you knew what that meant. I'm curious. All right. No one, huh? Oh man, stumped them all. Well, good, we're learning something, huh? That's good. All right, so the next question. There's so much in the opera that is Spanish. There are Spanish dance forms, there are Spanish dances, there's a lot of Spanish rhythms, inflections, harmonies, if you will. So really, is it a French opera or a Spanish opera? I've heard this question asked before. For those of you that don't know what the opera is about, let me just back up for a second because I think it's important to say a lot of things. So Bizet is a French composer, and he wrote an opera, Carmen, which is set in Seville, Spain, which is apparently everyone's favorite opera setting. There's The Barber of Seville, and there's The Marriage of Figaro, which is set in Seville. There's a lot of operas set in Seville. Not really sure why, but it's a fun little Spanish town. And it's basically it's a story about this soldier who falls in love with a tobacco factory worker by the name of Carmen. The soldier's name is Don José. José is a member of the Dragoons, which is a very intimidating militaristic force, but he's basically, if you can imagine, early French special forces. So he's a no-nonsense kind of guy. Very militaristic guy, by the books. And here's Carmen, this very fleeting gypsy woman who is known for toying with men and playing with their emotions, stuff like that. Well, there's also a bullfighter who connects this love triangle, a bullfighter by the name of Escamillo, who comes from Granada in Spain. And so another element of Spain that comes very heavily into play is the aspect of bullfighting, and the toreador and the torero, which is basically the bullfighter. And obviously one of the most well-known pieces from Carmen is the toreador chorus and aria that's actually in our suite. And there's also, let me see what other aspects are there. There's the seguidilla, the Près des remparts de Sevilla, an aspect of vocal Spanish music that's set in it. So anyway, it's this love triangle that develops between these three. The first act basically introduces us to Don José and the idea of what the factory is, what it represents, who's working there. The women are the factory workers. The men are the ones that are like in the army or on the streets, and that's how the chorus is formed. And so we're introduced to Carmen, we're introduced to José, we learn a little bit about them. Act 2 is now the introduction of the tavern, if you will. And we are first introduced, the opening of Act 2 is a huge gypsy dance, and it's called the Danse Bohémienne. It's actually the last thing in our Carmen suite. It's, I think it may be labeled as Danse Bohémienne in your Carmen suite. But it basically is the opening of Act 2. It's where we're introduced to this very new exotic idea of a gypsy dance. And true to form, it starts with a very slow, deliberate, very emotive dance, and then evolves into a very fast dance. Very similar in style to a czardash. Very similar in style. Those two are very linked and interrelated. So we have that added element, which is really cool. Okay, so now we have Act 2, the introduction of this, but we also have an introduction of a new person that comes into the tavern after the dance is over. Escamillo, the grand toreador, makes his entrance into town and meets Carmen. And after José kind of falls in love with Carmen in Act 1, well, so does Escamillo in Act 2. At this point also, the band of gypsies that Carmen is a part of forms a plot to kind of make their entrance, to smuggle some stuff out. And that is the very famous Nous avons en tête. It's a quintet that is devilishly hard to perform. Anyway, so at the end of Act 2, we know that something's going to happen because we're introduced that two men love Carmen. Obviously, not both can have them. And she is known for just toying with their emotions. So we're already set up with this, like, what's going to happen kind of thing. Oh, wait, but there's also the added element that Don José is actually engaged to a lady by the name of Micaela, who makes her entrance in Act 3. That's right. She makes her entrance in Act 3. So we're about 2 hours into the opera. And we have, for the first time, a soprano. I said that correctly. At this point in time, operas were known for having sopranos as the main female representation on stage. With Carmen, we see a dramatic shift in that mezzo-sopranos are highlighted. Their darker tone quality, their slightly lower range gives a really kind of a more, I guess you could just say a darker tone quality to them. And so what happens to the soprano in this opera is has a lesser role. And so Micaela, Don José's fiance, pretty much the opening of Act 3 I just mentioned is this gypsy band kind of forming that plot, and where Act 3 opens with them in the mountains smuggling stuff out. Ironically, it's the march of the contrebandier, if you will, the contrebandier, which is the opening of our Carmen suite. That's the opening of Act 3 to Carmen. We see them all in the mountains. They're smuggling stuff out. It's very mysterious. And then out of nowhere, poof, Micaela shows up, determined to win her man back from the clutches of this evil gypsy woman, Carmen. And so she sings the very, very famous Jeudi Coréen, which is the very huge soprano aria. Gorgeous, gorgeous piece. Hey, guess what? Also in our Carmen Suite number 2. It is known as the Nocturne in our suite, a night piece, if you will. But that is actually Michaela's aria. It's her prayer, it's her aria of defiance, etc. It's a lot of emotions wrapped up in one piece. By the way, every Michaela ever in history has always thought that this opera is about them and revolves around them, even though they sing one thing in Act 3. That's for a later time. Anyway, so the scene is set for a dramatic confrontation, and it does finally occur. Let's just say there are 2 parts to this Act 3, and they can end in a variety of ways based on the version you're doing. But the generally accepted ending is that this traumatic confrontation occurs. José kills a lot of people, and basically it ends with Carmen is dead on stage, and it's a huge, massive, dramatic, kind of serious thing that happens at the end. Spoiler alert, but it's a very kind of telltale sign of what this opera was meant to represent, this serious verissimo kind of morality tale about love, jealousy, passion. So that's a brief summary of the opera plot. But you know, in the middle of all that serious stuff, I mentioned there's a lot of fun stuff too. There's a lot of dances, there's a lot of lighthearted music. In fact, the opening of the opera itself, I think, is completely contrary in character. After the opening, we see the factories presented and the army is stationed there at the beginning. Well, right after that is a kids march. The kids kind of march in with the relief. The soldiers are going to relieve the guards that are standing there. And they're accompanied by kids, and it's a fun little jovial little thing. Oh, by the way, we're playing that in our suite too. That's the Marche Militaire. That is the second thing in the opera itself. But it's such a fun, cute little piece, unassuming, just so lighthearted. And I think it's a perfect blend. And on one end of the spectrum, the most innocent, fun little dance piece to then the very end of the opera. So it has everything, this piece. And I think that's why it survived so much and why it's so famous, why it's so popular. So, the question arose again, is it a French or a Spanish opera? Up for you to decide, really. It's still considered to be a French opera based on many of the things. You can feel free to read this. I'm going to send this all out to you. But generally, it's accepted. It's a French opera with a lot of Spanish influence and a lot of cool stuff. In it, rather. So one thing that I want to just touch on before we dive into our Carmen suite, and I think I've said that a few times, our suite, because there are many in existence. In fact, I want to just show you here in this document, there are many versions of the suite in existence. I think in your email, you received a photo of the front page of the Choudin edition, first version Carmen. It looks like this. If you've received it, okay. Go ahead and pull that up if you will, because I think this is a fascinating historical document, and it's actually the score that I own as well. But if you look at this, at the opening page here, basically what it says is the second suite of Carmen opera in 4 acts, 2 suites for the concert, for orchestra by Georges Bizet, which the opera was by Bizet, but these suites are not, fun fact. And then under that, it has highlighted the first suite and second suite. First one includes the prelude, which is the opening of the opera, which then goes into the fate motive, very famous fate motive, the Carmen motive, which is in every production, the pivotal moment of Act 1 is when Carmen throws her rose right at José, and we hear that, boom, that fate motive. That's when she has him. Anyway, after the prelude, we have the Aragonese, the intermezzo, the Dragon d'Alcalá, and the Toreador song. Okay, well, I want you to look at the second suite here. Prelude, again, the same prelude, so the opening overture to the opera, essentially. And then the march of the contrebandier, the smuggler's march, the gypsy march. And then the habanera, the very famous habanera, and then the marche militaire, and then the seguidilla. Very interesting, isn't it? In fact, I'm going to go scroll down now because I want to show you these laid out on paper, how these look. And then there's also our version, which is the Bright Coffin Hartel from 1910. And the first movement is the Contrebandier, the Habanera, and then all of a sudden we have this new thing, the Nocturne added in, Michael Azaria. Then we jump back into the Toreador. But wait, that's not in the original either, is it? If you look at the original Choudon edition, is there any mention of the Toreadors in the second suite? There is not. So all of a sudden we have two new movements in here. And then that's followed by La Garde Montante, which is the Marche Militaire, and then the Danse Bohème, the gypsy song. But wait a minute, in the second suite, the original one, is the Seguidilla. So where's the Seguidilla now? Well, it's not in either the first one or the second one. Kind of amazing. So this really famous Près des remparts de Seville doesn't really have a home in the suites. And so often it's put in to either one or two in some place because you got to play it, you got to do it. But I want to just show you this. Under our two suites, what's fascinating to me, how many different versions of this opera exist? Not just a suite, this is the full opera. There's a Schirmer, there's a Ricordi, there's a Peters / Dover / Calmus, which are reprints of this one. Then there's an Alcor edition from 1964 that kind of blew the world. And then there's a new Choudon. There's a new Schott version from 2000 and a new Peters. Whew, that's exhausting. That's a lot of different editions. And the reason why is because this piece had such a complicated history with source materials. A lot of different scores existed at the time. It was not helpful that Georges Bizet passed away 3 months after the opera premiered. And so we didn't really have the suites. We didn't really have an alternative edition to the first premiered edition in Paris. We just have the first one with dialogue. We didn't even have one with recitatives. So who did all this other work? I mean, who created this grand opera version? Who created these suites? And that is his friend and student, Ernest Guiraud. You may have heard that name before. We did the Farandole from the Arlésienne suites, number 2, by Bizet, but really by Guiraud as well. Guiraud was a very famous arranger. He was a composer as well. He studied with Bizet, but really what he's known for most of these days, I think personally, is his arrangements of Bizet's music. That's what he's remembered for. And so these first editions, the Choudon version, and then our Breitkopf version and other versions, they all come from Guiraud. Interesting thing to note is that although they very closely follow Bizet's orchestration, they are not the same. There are differences. There are in dynamics, in order of things, in orchestration, etc. So there are differences. And so even in the suites, we don't really have a definitive version because it doesn't exist. And this is also, like I said, made more difficult by the fact that Bizet passed away. And so we didn't really have a definitive version. Bizet himself worked feverishly hard on the opening of Carmen. And so he rewrote, he edited, he made changes, he took note of what the director was doing, took out pieces, added pieces, took some, I mean, it was a work in progress even until the premiere. That's very important to note because even after the premiere, those first 10 performances were then different from the next performances of the same run. He added back in some things, took out some things. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. At this point, the contract did exist with the Vienna State Opera to do this grand opera, and so he knew he was going to make these recitatives, but he wasn't able to complete them. But also, a lot of these original scores disappeared. They were filed away, or they were thought to be lost. There was a huge fire in 1887 at Choudon, the first publisher, and a lot of people thought the early editions of Carmen were lost. These were rediscovered in 1964. I mentioned the Alcor edition of 1964. A gentleman by the name of Usser was the one that discovered the manuscript conductor's score, the original one that they used in the premiere in Paris. And this blew away all the previous editions. He changed articulations, dynamics, added numbers back in. I mean, you name it, there were changes. And so it created a lot more confusion. In fact, some people loved this, some people hated it. It didn't help many things. In fact, I want to just show you something, and this is my score. This is the recording version of Carmen. This is the full score, huge, 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 from the time that I did it with El Paso Opera. But I want to just show you something that's really cool, and it actually involves one of the numbers that we have in our suite. It is the Marche Militaire. I'm just gonna skip ahead here. Okay, so what's interesting in this edition of Record is that they include those changes that Giraud and Usser both had. But one thing that's really cool, and I want to show you. Okay, so the end of the first half of the march kind of ends like this. In our suite, the next thing that we hear is the trumpet fanfare again. But check this out. In the original score, and you can see a letter O, which is meant to represent Usser, there's a melodrama. And this melodrama involves a solo violin, a solo cello. It's basically the dialogue written out in the form of a little scene, okay, between José and Morales, the other corporal on duty. But then on the next page, which is really confusing in this book, is a recitative, and there's a letter G in the top corner. Okay, so that is the Giraud version. That is the recitative version of the same exact scene. The previous page is the melodrama, which existed in the original performance that Bizet wrote, that was discovered by Usser in '64. So you have two choices. Oh, sorry, no, you have three choices. You can do either the melodrama, you can do either the recitative, or you can do dialogue, which was probably also done at the Opera Comique when Bizet was there, which is why it didn't exist in the first publication. So you have three choices, but are any of those in our suite? The answer is no. And this is because, obviously, this is a vocal scene. It's a scene with characters in it. It moves some plot and action along. But sadly for us, that means that we miss all that. And so what we get is just a repetition, essentially, of the first material in a different key. Still fun, still exciting. It makes it an A-B form. But we miss that whole kind of drama of you know, this first kind of interaction between them. So that's just, I wanted to paint you a picture of the additions and how much confusion there is between all of them, because even today there's no definitive whatsoever. So that's kind of fun. All right, another thing that is really cool that I wanted to point out to you is the habanera. L'amour est un oiseau rebelle, the very, very famous kind of seductive bum, 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 that whole thing that we now love and adore. But I want to send you a link and just take a listen to it. I'm going to actually send you the link in the chat box here. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And where's the chat function? Chat function. I'm going to send you all this link. Okay. By the way, the reason why we had emailed all these files to you prior to is because the option of file transferring is not a thing on Zoom at this point in time because of security. We've had a lot of people Zoom bombing meetings and things like that. So it's not an option at the moment. So otherwise I would send you this. Wait a minute. Well, that's funny. I checked Zoom 20 minutes before we got on and it was not an option, but now I'm seeing the option to send documents. So let me try to send you this document that I'm looking at right now, because maybe that'll be great.
It's probably a feature that's only available once a meeting has started.
I ran into this a few times already, but it looks like it's working now, so that's great. Let me see, go back to this chat here. So I just sent you all, you should check your chat option. Did everybody get the document I just sent? Show me a thumbs up if you got it. Bill, did you say something?
Document or link?
I sent you a link and then followed by the Word document. So you should have two things for me. Show me a thumbs up if you have both things. Thumbs down, thumbs down, thumbs down. Who is missing the Word document? Just raise your hand.
Me, Joshua.
All right, everyone, it seems. Okay, well, I guess it doesn't, in fact, work, but that's too bad. But does everybody have the link I sent you?
Yeah.
Thumbs up.
No.
Okay, I'm gonna resend the link. Check your chat box, like I said. All right, so there's the link, the YouTube link I just sent. So take a minute and listen to this piece. I think it'll be very interesting. I too will listen to it just for timing purposes. So I'll see you in about 2 minutes.
Que tú ya sabes que muero por ti, chinito mío, ven por aquí, que tú ya sabes que muero por ti. No voy allí, porque no tengo confianza en ti. No voy allí, porque no tengo confianza en ti. Que sí. Que no tengo confianza en ti. Si tú me quieres, di lo que grito y enseguidita seré tu arreglito. Si tú me quieres, di lo que grito y enseguidita seré tu arreglito. Y enamorados sin abusar, una dancita vamos a bailar. Y enamorados sin abusar, una dancita vamos a bailar. Niñita mía, mi dulce amor, te estoy queriendo con tanto ardor, que el alma mía.
Everybody should be about 2 minutes in right now. Is that about right? Did everybody get to at least the minor section? That's basically where the question I'm going to ask. Yes. Okay. So let's just stop that there, the video, because I think it's a really fun thing to listen to. The piece is by a Spanish Basque composer by the name of Iradier. And it's a really, really cool piece, but obviously it sounds like habanera. So which one came first? And the answer is Iradier came first. And Bizet thought this was a folk melody, and so he used it as the basis. And he used it as the basis of his piece, the habanera, which literally translates to a piece from Havana. And it's now we don't think of it as anything other than Bizet's piece, but it was actually gained popularity thanks to Iradier, who is actually, by the way, known for this other piece called La Paloma, which I'm going to send you in the link. Don't worry about listening to it right now, not necessary. Listen to it later for fun. It's a lot of fun. You'll know it. Besides another very, very famous piece, this is the second most recorded piece in history, apparently. It's in different versions and other such things. So La Paloma, you'll all recognize it, I promise. Okay, I just wanted to point that out because not only does this add to our confusion of editions, but it also adds to our confusion of authenticity. Is it actually Bizet's music? And so this was, to no fault of his own, he desperately tried to incorporate native folk melodies that were not famously performed pieces. He tried to make it as authentic of a folk opera as he possibly could. This one simply slipped through the cracks. And that makes sense. If you think about any sort of famous parlor tune back in the day, somebody would know it. Somebody would hear it in some town, play it in another town, and eventually it would kind of get back around. And that's just how it was. So fun for us because we get to see where it actually came from. But so now let's dive into our suite in full. I already mentioned that the Contrebandier opens up Act 3. It's the Smuggler's March set in the mountains outside of Seville. And so I wrote, let me share my screen again so you can see what I'm looking at here. Before I do that, let me get you the link. What I want you to watch. Okay. So there's another link that I just sent you that everybody should have. All right. So I included this really fun link, and I want you to watch the opening few minutes. It begins with a ballet. So the grand opera version of Carmen, this is a testament to that. So I believe if you click this link, where does it take you? Yeah, so it takes you to the festival recording, which is great. So if you want to watch the march itself, skip ahead to 307. I'll see you in a minute. There we go. Whoops, I muted myself so I wasn't bleeding into everyone's mics, but whoops, that's an awkward moment. So let's talk about that first piece. It's supposed to represent a night march. So clearly a nighttime piece, a lot of mysterious qualities. Nothing ever gets too loud. Nothing ever gets too bombastic or too, it's just all very hush hush. Don't disturb anyone. We don't want to let anyone know we're here. And that's really the mood of the entire piece. And if you look at the whole movement, I challenge you, you can look at your full score or the parts, whatever you have available. I challenge you to find a double F. So not a forte, but a fortissimo. And the challenge is on. Go ahead. Let's see who finds one first. I'm curious who's going to find one first. Shout it out when you have it. Raise your hand, whatever. Just where's the first one? My point is proven, I think, right? So one doesn't exist for a long time. In fact, you have to go all the way to letter H to find the first fortissimo. And that's really not too far from the end of the piece. The whole thing is a giant, giant, quiet, mysterious piece. And that's the 3 words I used in the Word doc to define it. So that just paints you that picture. The opening horn call, again, supposed to represent just the opening of the act. That's all it actually is. A lot of folks try to use it as some sort of thematic element with the set play, but it's really just a way to be like, hey guys, we're starting. All of you people in Paris that were raucous in 1875, there's some horns playing. Oh, okay, guys, it's starting. And then, only then would everyone quiet down enough to actually hear because, I mean, not many instruments play there, obviously. So I just find that very fun. Okay, the next thing we have is the habanera, which we all know and love. Which we just talked about, so we're not going to go too much into that. If you want to see a great version of it, here is, I just sent you a link of Agnes Balza doing this years ago. This is, I forget which opera house that was in, but what's interesting about this one is that you hear the end of the recitative right before the habanera as part of the opening of this video, which is really, really cool. Again, an homage to all those different versions. But we're not going to listen to it right now because we all have heard that one 1,000 different times. The interesting about a habanera, though, that I will say that is going to impact our performance of it is the contrasts. So it starts off in a minor key, very quiet again. And then all of a sudden, midway through, it's in major and it's a happy melody. It's a lyrical legato. Everything in the beginning is quite staccato. The emphasis is on the offbeats. The 16ths have a lot of kind of stuff in them. But the hardest thing about a habanera is to play long phrases because we always get bogged down with rhythms, with articulations, with playing every note correctly and very precisely. We forget about the fact that it's a melody. So when you're practicing these parts or when you're playing through them, listening to them, think of the long line. The challenge there is, yes, it's a dance, it's a slow dance, but it's also a vocal line. Can I find the rhythmic qualities in this lyrical passage? All right. Moving on to movement 3, the nocturne, or really better known as jeudi. I'm going to send you this link to jeudi because I would love for us to actually watch a little bit of it. All right, and there is Angela Gheorghiu performing this one, and we know her. She's a very famous Verdi soprano, has performed many Verdi roles, but she's perfect in this role here. And so she's singing Michaela. Go ahead and enjoy this one. I'll see you in a second. Okay, did everybody get a chance to get through at least like 1 or 2 minutes of that? Great. Obviously, she's a stunning soprano, and she's just so good. One thing that's really cool and a big difference in our suite version and the actual opera itself is that Michaela in our suite is represented by a violin, a solo violin, which is a very, very poignant texture. It's, in particular, what I would like you to look at if you have your parts or scores up is letter C in the full score. Measure, let's see. Well, you should all have letter C. Yes, it's in every version. It's the allegro, essentially. Allegro molto moderato. Everybody have that? Everybody see what I'm looking at? What's very interesting, if you're looking at the full score, hopefully you are, of this, you'll see where the violin solo is playing in what range. And I want to show you how different that is from the full score. I'm just gonna, no, here we go. Which is, there we go. All right, this is from the original opera itself. Je vais here, so it begins here. This is the second section, the Allegro Moderato. And then here on the bottom, it continues. Okay, especially after that high G, she goes back down. But notice in the full score, the violin stays in that octave and actually goes into the altissimo range. Again, the differences in between these two are actually really profound, because these are Guiraud's editions, by the way, and what he meant to highlight by doing that, these changes in registration, is how delicate her tone is supposed to be in certain spots, which can impact how we, in turn, as an orchestra accompanying this aria, should internalize those melodies. So the second bar of C into the third bar, and then let's see what else. 2 before D. 2 before D is a massively poignant moment, because she is unsure of herself. This chromatic harmony on the D flat to the D natural, the measure before D, is a massively, massively big moment for her emotionally. She's not sure of herself, and the violin's an octave higher than the soprano would be. Interesting. So these are meant to highlight those differences. And that's the thing I'd love for you to take away from this one, if you're comparing your part with the full score of this, or with the full score of the actual opera itself, or if you're just listening to the full recording later after we get off of here. So again, meant to highlight a massive character kind of emotional turmoil. The first part is unsure. It's really a prayer. It's really a cry for help. The second one, the Allegro, where she sings, Je vais voir de près cette femme. She's kind of gathering her strength. She's now, I got this. I can take this chick. It's no thing. But then these moments where she's like, oh, maybe I can't, that chromatic piano lines. So it's meant to represent a lot of very different emotions. It's such a poignant, beautiful piece. I'm so glad it's in our version, because it's a beautiful, beautiful piece. So enjoy listening to it, enjoy playing it. And really go for those qualities, lyrical, just full of contrast again, and very emotional. Okay, the next thing, we have the Chanson du Toreador, which I think we all know and have heard 1,000 times also. So I'm not gonna stop our chat in order for you to listen to it. I'm gonna send you a link though, and that is Robert Merrill as Escamillo. This is from a 1965 TV broadcast, which is awesome. He's not the greatest French singer, so his diction's pretty spotty, but it's still an awesome video, because you get to see a 1965 televised version of this opera. It's fantastic, so enjoy that later on. But this whole thing is meant to be raucous, fun. It's a bar scene, it's a party scene. This guy just slayed a big bull, so I mean, they're all out celebrating. It's supposed to be that way. A complete contrast to the Michaela aria that just came before it. So really, in keeping with the suite, we have a massive shift in emotion here. So great, perfect. After the party, we keep the party going with a very different kind of party, and that's the military march that I just mentioned. the kids march with the soldiers from Act 1. Like I said, really the first main thing we see in this opera. And I thought this was really cool to see. I'm going to send you a link. Hang on a second. To everyone in the meeting. Here's a really cool version. I know it's 7 o'clock, but we started at 6:05, so I'm just going to take like 3-4 minutes more of your time. And I want you to just like open it up real quick and check this out, because it's actually a rehearsal of this piece with kids in France. I just think it's really cute. So take a listen to it. So I'm actually going to kind of bring us back right away, because I just wanted you to get a taste of that one. I already sent you a second link to this in performance, so you can see how adorable this actually looks on stage. So the second link I just sent you is, I forget which production this is of, but just a great, great version of this. And I really enjoyed when I was preparing this opera. That was like my go-to recording of this piece. Take a listen to it really quickly while I pull up the next thing. Okay, everybody got a good look at that one? That's just a whole lot of fun, isn't it? I love that little piece. So again, a very kind of keeping it lighthearted, but really what we're building up to is just like a big finish. So the last 3 movements of the Art Suite, numbers 4, 5, and 6, the Toreador, the Military March, and now the very exciting Gypsy Song. It's supposed to give this whole piece a kind of just a fun, dramatic ending with a lot of energy that keeps moving. And what better piece to do that than the piece that actually just gets more and more energetic, gets faster and faster. And that is the opening of Act 2, like I just said, the exciting, very energetic Gypsy Dance. In the full score, it's actually listed as Danse Bohemienne. In the full opera version, it's obviously not called that. It's called by its, of course, the actual name of the piece. But, it's an incredibly powerful piece. I'm going to send you the video of this. And the reason why I like this version is because what they actually highlight is the dance itself. This begins, we literally stop the opera for about a minute or two, and we actually see the dance. We see the actual steps that would have been used, which is really cool. So take a look at this. I'm going to just speak over this as you kind of open it up and see it for yourselves. But as I just said, it keeps kind of getting more and more exciting. It's more and more fun. It's very similar to the orchestration that we have in our concert version. Not a lot has changed. Of course, the biggest differences are that the violins are now playing the vocal lines that you would hear from the trio of Gypsy Girls. But I think it's a great ending to this concert version. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. But so those are the 6 movements, kind of in brief, touching them gently and then kind of leading to the next one. I'm going to send you all this doc after we're done, because I want you to have the links available to you for reference to see what words I associate with each of the movements and things like that. But hopefully this helped at least understand the music a bit more, where it comes from, why it's important, what's its significance in the opera itself. Hope that's very helpful. So yeah, and by the way, I have 2 versions are suite. That was a lot of fun. And it's always a lot of fun at the first rehearsal if you don't have the right edition to see if you're going to perform the right thing. So anyway, it's neither here nor there. But let's just jump back into the Word doc for a second. I'm going to share my screen. We're almost done, folks. Bear with me for a second. There we go. Share my screen. Okay. Fun facts. There is no definitive version of Carmen. There are way too many. That is just completely true. As we've already alluded to, there's about 17 floating versions out there at any given moment in time. And by the way, you can make up your own mind if you want to do recitatives or dialogue or just nothing at all. And if you want to have ballets or choruses, if you want to take out certain pieces, add the originals back, there is no definitive version. And that's what makes this piece really cool and alive, because I think anytime you go see it, it's going to be different somehow. And, you know, we often say that a lot of this music that was written so long ago is just overplayed, it's overdone, it's dead. But really this piece proves this so wrong, because every time you do it, it's going to be new. It's going to be a new performance style. We always seem to gain new information and knowledge about Carmen. There's new information being unearthed. There's new critical edition scores being printed. So there's always something we can kind of gain from seeing it again. So anytime you see it available at your local opera company, go see it. It's probably going to be a version you haven't seen before, which makes it really cool. This is an interesting thing that's not often known to the orchestra world, but in the opera world, it's kind of a running joke. The roles of Frasquita and Mercedes are often switched in these scores. This is a point of so much contention, and I have a very funny story about it. So basically what this means is that in the original score, Bizet miswrote which part was supposed to be sung by who. So the soprano singing Frasquita, which is a higher part and sits higher, was meant for a soprano, and Mercedes was meant to be a mezzo-soprano. Easy way to remember it, Mercedes, M, mezzo-soprano, M. So in the original score, it's printed in the reverse, but it's commonly known now that those two are switched. But you have to make that absolutely clear when you're hiring singers. For example, when I went to El Paso in 2016 to assist them on this production, I was the rehearsal conductor and pianist for this. We get to the first day of rehearsals, and I have Mercedes come up to me, the singer singing it. I'm like, and she's like, "So we're doing the normal switches, right?" And I'm like, "Absolutely. That's not even a thought for me." And then I was forwarded the email by the director who overheard that conversation and said, "We're doing original roles." So Frasquita comes up to me and she says, "I'm singing Mercedes, right?" So both of them learned the exact same part. And so we didn't really have a Frasquita part. Both of them had learned Mercedes, and that was just a hot mess. So the Frasquita thankfully learned the part in 2 days. Good for her. It didn't hurt that she was the wife of the conductor, so that makes it helpful. But it's a really funny story just about, it reminds me time and time again, make sure you have all your ducks in a row, that when you're giving out music, it's the correct music and to the right people. It's true for us in the orchestra world as well. Anytime we perform this kind of piece that has had 27,000 versions of it in history, make sure you know what edition you're using, which cuts you're doing, things like that. So it's just a lesson learned. It's true not only in music, but in other things as well. So just always know what you're doing, know what you're working on, and what you're sending to who, especially when you sign contracts. All right, the last fun fact is that Carmen is cursed. Inevitably, in every production of Carmen, something will go wrong. Something is going to break. Something is going to happen. Someone's going to break an ankle. Something's going to happen. And this kind of started as a fun joke. It's kind of like, I forget what's the theater piece that has the same association. Is it Macbeth? I think it's Macbeth, isn't it? Pretty much, don't say Macbeth when you get on stage. Don't say Carmen when you get into an orchestra pit. Same exact thing. And, you know, I thought it was a joke. I really did. I read all about the Carmen curse. It started because Bizet died after a performance of Carmen, because apparently it went so poorly. And so anyway, it was just a tall tale that was spun to kind of give this production some more kind of oomph. But then we get to El Paso production in 2016 that I worked on, and I already told you about the Frasquita Mercedes incident. Well, then the conductor's father passed away, and he had to go to the Czech Republic, and so he had to be replaced. And so we had no conductor, and so then it was given to me for a day, and then they hired someone else to do it. Oh, by the way, the Frasquita that I mentioned before broke her ankle in the dress rehearsal, doing one of the dance moves. So yeah, I think Carmen is a tiny bit cursed, because our production had all the fun things going on in 2016. So thankfully for us, we're just doing the concert version, so crisis averted. A lot of this music is very fun. It's very, very lighthearted in the suites, and I hope you would all enjoy listening to it as much as you do performing it. The links I sent you are a lot of fun, and they show a lot of different styles of the various different kinds of Carmens that exist out there in the world today. So make sure to just go back and listen to them, enjoy them. They're gonna help you a lot understand your own parts in preparing this suite. Last thing is further reading. Again, I'll send you this document so you have it, but this is a really cool book. It's a performance guide. So all of you Bizet fans and Carmen fans that really want to like super nerd out on this piece, this is like the definitive performance text to this day. And it talks about, I'll show you the index for all of you that are curious. So it goes through the literary sources, concepts. It has a breakdown of the French diction for every single word in this opera, all the recitatives, translations. It also includes the various sources that were used to create this opera. So the Prosper Mary May Carmen, his other letters from Spain, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a really, really cool book. I'll show you a page with the French translation so you get to see what it looks like. Welcome to a Singer's Life. That's what it looks like. You got the French, you've got the IPA, and then you've got, it's just a lot of fun. Yeah. Has anyone ever used IPA? Oh, it's so much fun. It's so much fun. Anyway, but that's really the last thing today. So I hope you enjoyed this chat. One thing I'm going to do now is send you the poll. I'm going to launch the first poll. And I'm just curious, for those of you that are remaining in the chat, which of the Carmen suites do you prefer? Because one is more typically done. Two is not done as often. It's longer, and it has music that is arguably not as popular or as famous. But I'm curious as to see who's going to say what. We have two votes in so far. All right. Oh, we have now. Okay, now it's a heated battle. Heated battle now. All right. 3 votes for number 2. 1 vote for 1. Looks like number 2 has it. Who said they prefer number 1? I'm curious. Oh, Josh, clearly my talk was not inspirational enough for you. I see. I didn't win you over to the number 2 side. That's cool. All right, we're gonna end the poll. Oh, somebody snuck in some votes at the end there. So it's 4-2 in favor of number 2. I'm so glad. All right, here we go. Check out those poll results. Okay, glorious. Okay. Now let me go to the polling, and how do I want to do number? Okay, number 2. Here's number 2, and this is kind of I'm discovering more and more about Zoom as we go, but I'm also discovering more and more about these virtual hangs as we go. I believe there's 9 of you left, or 10 of you left on the chat. I know Bill had to go eat some dinner. But for those of you that are still on, what I'd love to do is have you answer this question. I think I made it anonymous, so don't worry, I don't see your answers. But I would love for you, I'm going to leave this up as I wrap this up. But I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to see how you think we can improve these virtual music hangs. Make them longer, make them shorter, more frequent, not as much. Do it on something we're not playing. Maybe more demonstrations playing on the piano, or more files, like more interaction with us, those that are watching, different topics, whatever. I've included all the things I could possibly think of. So feel free to answer. Again, this is anonymous, so nothing is going to be, I'm not going to see any of this except for the final results. So go ahead and please, if you would, just to help me out. We don't know how long we're going to be doing this virtual style of rehearsing, so I want to make sure it's as beneficial to us and as fun as possible. If it's looking like we're going to do this for weeks and weeks, I'll try to think of new ideas. But either way, just send along your answers to this poll if you would, please. That would help me out greatly. All right. Now that we're doing that, though, I just want to say, does anyone have any questions, first of all, about anything in your parts or anything at all? Is there any questions? Oh, we have a question this week. All right, good. Savannah asks, is the Carmen suite based off of anything specifically in history? That is a great question, Savannah. The short answer is no, question mark. Because what we know is that Carmen itself is a work of fiction, but how much of it is based on Prosper Mérimée autobiographical travels to Spain, how much he saw himself, what he encountered and witnessed, we don't really know. Based on reading his materials, you could probably venture a guess and say that some of the things in Carmen are true, and maybe not as they pertain to the storyline, but they did happen. Like there was a mountain guard in Sevilla, and there were gypsies that had a big smuggling ring there. So is it any specific event? No, that we know of, but many events did occur, if that helps answer that question as confusingly as possible. Anyone else have a question? That's a great question, Savannah, thank you. How many movements does it have? Okay, Annalise, so did you mean in the whole opera, how many movements? Okay, great question also. I highlighted this in your Word doc, and you'll see this when you receive the Word doc, but it has 26 different movements, depending on how you split up number 26. It has 26 individual movements. Now, the fun thing about the suite is, both suites really, depending on the versions you do and who edited that particular suite, there's anywhere from 10 to 12 different movements from the opera itself included in both of these concert suites. What does that mean? That's nearly half of the opera's movements that's available as concert performance. And it also shows how fun it is, how many dance movements there are, how varied the music is. So I think that's a testament to why Carmen has been a success, because there's been so much really good, memorable music that's come out of the opera. So that's a great question, but all in all, about half of the opera is in the suites. So 26 different movements. Cindy, I see you have to go leave for dinner. Thank you very much for stopping by. Anyone else have a question for me? Anyone else? These are really good ones.
Oh, I have a question.
Okay.
My question is that, like, between the Carmen suite, like number 1 and number 2, what was this that with number 1? I was wondering if that still could be considered more like an ensemble piece, like how number 2 is, like to fill in the missing voices.
I'm muted. You said ensemble piece. What did you mean by that? Because I don't think I understand that.
So my sounds like what is this that is talk about with the 4th suite, it would have like mostly the preludes and interacts, but then the second Carmen suite, it will be to fill in the missing voices.
Oh,
I have played Carmen Suite number 1, so it should be considered like a summer piece. It don't says that's the difference.
oh, gotcha. I just think honestly that they tried to put in very contrasting movements that are memorable from the opera in both suites. So I don't know if there's necessarily a delineation between number 1 has the more important pieces and number 2 is kind of the less important pieces in the opera. And I think what they were primarily going for is a contrast of emotions. So which of these go well with this one, or how do these relate better to this one? Are they in similar keys? So I think really it was more of a practical solution why we have these two split up the way we do. But again, in this day and age, you really can create your own suite. And we actually toyed with that in our music committee meetings, was to just combine 1 and 2 and kind of make a mesh of both of them for us, because you really, in this day and age, there's no right or wrong, and there's no definitive version of it. So we can do what we want. So to answer your question, it's just a matter of contrasting movements that are kind of related. That's all.
Okay, thank you.
You got it. Anyone else got one before we wrap up? No. Well, that's 3 really good questions. So we'll end it there. I want to thank you all so much. Please, if you could, if you haven't yet, please answer the poll question. I'd love to see what your response is to that one. But that being said, thank you all so much. We will see you on Monday at 6. I haven't decided what we're going to do yet, because we've gone through the 3 classical pieces on the first program. So topic TBD. You'll find out on Sunday. How's that? Sound good? All right. So thank you all again very much, and we'll see you on Monday. Enjoy the rest of your week. Stay safe, stay warm, or cool now that it's 85. And we'll see you soon. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, Wojciech.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Muski.